Hey everyone, and welcome. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us for today's Explainer. We're about to embark on a really fascinating micro journey into a world that's, well, completely invisible to us, yet it's absolutely essential for life on Earth. We are going to explore the hidden, literally breathing atmosphere located directly beneath our feet. We'll uncover exactly how the ground itself functions as this complex, living lung. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap for today. First, the hidden soil atmosphere, then, the mechanisms of gaseous exchange, third, taking the soil's pulse, fourth, when the soil suffocates, and finally, managing soil aeration.
Kicking things off with Section 1, the hidden soil atmosphere. What lies beneath?
It's easy to think of soil as just a solid block of dirt, right? But it's actually a highly dynamic mixture of solid, liquid, and gas. To really understand soil aeration, we've got to zoom way in. We need to look at the microscopic, continuous pore spaces, those tiny gaps not occupied by solid soil. These pores are filled with water and, crucially for our explainer today, soil air. Now, if you compare the nitrogen and oxygen levels in these pores to the air around us, it's pretty surprising. The nitrogen proportion is incredibly similar, sitting right around 79% in both. Oxygen is fairly close too, just over 20% in the soil compared to roughly 21% up here in the atmosphere. But the real story? It's all about the carbon dioxide. And that brings us to a truly staggering figure, 10 to 10,000. Because of the constant biological activity, think plant roots and microorganisms just constantly reacting down there, the carbon dioxide content in the soil can be anywhere from 10 to 10,000 times higher than the atmospheric air we breathe. That is wild. As oxygen gets used up, carbon dioxide is rapidly produced. This means that inside these local pockets, especially in the deeper layers, the atmosphere is incredibly dynamic and vastly different from the surface. So with such a massive buildup of CO2, you've got to wonder, how does the whole system not just completely choke itself out? Well, that leads us right into Section 2, mechanisms of gaseous exchange, how the soil breathes. So there are two primary physical processes doing the work to balance out these massive differences in gas composition. We have mass flow and diffusion. Mass flow is essentially forced air. It happens when there's a difference in the total pressure between the soil air and the atmosphere above it. This pressure difference pops up because gases naturally expand and contract with temperature changes, or shifts in barometric pressure. Or air can just be physically pushed out and replaced by rainfall, irrigation, or drainage. Diffusion, on the other hand, is driven by the partial pressures of individual gases. It's simply the random molecular motion of gases moving from an area where they're highly concentrated to an area where they're less concentrated. But here is the absolutely crucial point. Between those two mechanisms, diffusion is doing the heavy lifting. Actually, diffusion accounts for more than 90% of all gaseous exchange in the soil. And this process is perfectly captured by Fick's law. As biological activity constantly exhausts oxygen and cranks out carbon dioxide, the partial pressure changes. Fick's law dictates that the rate of this continuous interchange relies entirely on three things: the concentration gradient, the diffusion coefficient, and the cross-sectional area of those tiny pore spaces we talked about a minute ago. Let's move on to Section 3, taking the soil's pulse, characterization and measurement. Now, you may be wondering, how in the world do scientists actually measure this invisible, dynamic gas activity? Well, they look at parameters like overall gaseous composition and oxidation reduction potential. Another really key metric is the volume percentage of soil air, which is also known as air capacity. Basically, a healthy soil needs a minimum air capacity of 10 to 12% just to function properly. But the absolute most critical measurement is something called the oxygen diffusion rate, or ODR. Here's exactly how they measure it. The ODR tells us how fast oxygen can be replenished when roots and microbes are actively consuming it. Scientists insert a specialized tool right into the dirt. It has a platinum microelectrode and a reference electrode, both connected to a voltmeter and an ammeter. When they apply an electrical potential, oxygen actually reduces right there at the platinum surface. Each single molecule of oxygen takes up exactly 4 electrons. This chemical reaction allows a measurable current to flow between the electrodes, and that specific current is proportionally governed by the rate of oxygen diffusion. It's a brilliant way to literally read the breathing rate of the Earth.
And taking that measurement is absolutely critical because of a very specific and frankly alarming threshold: 20 times 10 to the negative 8th grams per square centimeter per minute. Research clearly shows that when the oxygen diffusion rate drops to this exact level, root growth just stops. It ceases entirely, no way around it.
Which brings us to Section 4, when the soil suffocates, effects on plants and nutrients. So what actually happens when aeration drops below those critical thresholds? Well, the cascading biological failures happen fast. First, like we just saw, plant root development is severely restricted or outright stopped. And because of that, the root's ability to absorb water and vital nutrients drops significantly. But it gets worse because the soil itself becomes actively hostile. Without enough oxygen, the rate at which microbes decompose organic matter is totally thrown out of whack. This anaerobic state causes highly toxic organic acids to form, specifically lactic, butyric, and citric acids. These acids directly injure the plant roots, further crippling their ability to survive. It's a really vicious cycle.
And this whole situation creates a deeply fascinating chemical paradox inside suffocating soil. Because of the poor aeration, the availability of certain essential nutrients, like zinc and manganese, is severely reduced. Yet at the exact same time, the altered chemical state pushes other elements, like iron and manganese, to outright toxic levels. On top of that, vital processes like biological nitrogen fixation, which completely rely on well-aerated microbes, are totally inhibited. And just to top it all off, the incidence and virulence of plant diseases significantly increase. Clearly, poor aeration is a total disaster for soil health. So how do we use this science to fix the problem?
That's what we'll cover in our final section, Section 5, Managing Soil Aeration, Breathing Life Back In. If we want to maintain a healthy, fully functioning soil ecosystem, we have to hit some exact scientific benchmarks. The oxygen diffusion rate needs to be managed, so it sits at a minimum of 30 times 10 to the negative 8th grams per square centimeter per minute. And the overall oxygen concentration within the soil air, that must be kept at least 10%.
So how do we actually hit those targets out in the field? Well, remember Fick's law from earlier? Since diffusion is the main agent for air renewal, we basically have to manipulate the soil to maximize that rate. We do this by creating a more open structure and maintaining a lower moisture content, simply because pores filled with water can't hold air. The standard actionable ways to create this vital porosity include physical tillage, actively incorporating organic matter, and utilizing mulching. Plus, providing proper drainage facilities is a highly effective immediate remedy to lower that moisture and instantly improve the overall air capacity of the soil.
We've seen today just how dynamic and incredibly sensitive the hidden atmosphere beneath our feet truly is. Knowing that diffusion, a process that is entirely dependent on those microscopic continuous pore spaces, drives over 90% of the soil's ability to breathe, it leaves us with a pretty vital question to consider. Are we doing enough in our agricultural and land management practices to protect the delicate, microscopic architecture of the soil that makes literally all life on the surface possible? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you next time.